Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. Lost Egyptian Temple. A team of archaeologists in Egypt recently made an incredible discovery. They uncovered a mysterious temple from 4,500 years ago. The temple dates back to the 5th dynasty and was found joined to a cemetery where pharaohs were once buried. Researchers say that in the 5th dynasty, which stretched between 2465 and 2323 BC, there were 6 main sun temples built in dedication to Ra, Egyptian god of the sun, lord of the sky, and king of kings. Up until recently, only 2 of these sun temples have been found, but now, thanks to a team of Polish and Italian archaeologists, it looks like we have a 3rd. The temple is currently a huge mystery. Mustafa Waziri from Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities described the structure as made from mud bricks and limestone. Clay seals were found inside bearing royal names, like King Shepseskare, who ruled Egypt in 2494 BC. They even found pots for beer, which was used during rituals and ceremonies. Ordinary people didn't just walk around drunk in ancient Egypt. Beer was typically reserved for ceremonies. The intoxicating effect of the beer would be attributed to the power of the gods. Because people only got drunk during ceremonies, they may have believed the effect was a direct result of honoring their deities. Number 9. Civita di Bagno Regio. Very few places in Europe look the same today as they did in the Middle Ages, but there is one place that looks almost identical, and it's nothing short of breathtaking. Civita di Bagno Regio is a medieval city that has remained untouched by the modern world. While Italians used to call it the dying town because of its slow decay, modern times have revitalized it and turned it into a major tourist attraction. Towns that before were dying are now cherished for their history, and so you can't even enter this city without paying a fee. What makes the medieval city so impressive is that it sits on the top of a mountain. The tower in the center of this city has impressive views of the surrounding Italian countryside in all directions, even overlooking the mountains in the distance. The city almost looks like it grew out from the top of the mountain, like it's been there since the dawn of time. In reality, the city was founded about 2,500 years ago. It was the Etruscans who first climbed the mountain's peak and thought the plateau looked like an excellent place for a settlement. In later years, the city fell under Roman rule, and after the 5th century and the fall of Rome, it was taken over by the Lombards. In 1695, Civita di Bagno Regio was decimated by an earthquake, and in the centuries that followed, it was virtually abandoned. Only recently did tourism save the city from crumbling to dust. And now for number 8, but first, it's shoutout time! I want to say a big thank you to Space Ranger Rick 13 and Leroy Majorman for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about mysterious ancient places. And let me know where you'd like to visit in the comments. Number 8. The Cursed Fort. India's Mehrangarh Fort is supposedly cursed. The ancient fortress is a testament to the architectural prowess of India in the Middle Ages. It was constructed 300 feet above the countryside in 1459. Even over 500 years later, the fort still stands proudly on the plateau, dominating the view from anywhere in the surrounding cities. Within the fortress itself are multiple palaces, some newer and some older. It has expansive courtyards, there is a public museum, and only a single road that winds from the mouth of the fortress down to the city below and the peasants who reside there. The fortress walls even have dents from where cannonballs hit them during battle. But you might be curious about the curse. According to legend, King Rao Jodha was the man who built the majestic fort by carving it out of the hill itself. But to do this, he had to first remove the people who were already living there. Everyone left the hill except a single old man who wanted to die in his own home. He was something of a saint, a known holy man who spent his days feeding birds. When the king forced him to leave his own property, the saint cursed the monarch that his kingdom would be plagued with miseries. The king was shocked to be cursed and tried desperately to get the old man to change his mind. The old man said the only way to remove the curse was if somebody sacrificed themselves and was buried in the foundations. A noble named Rajaram Meghwal was the one who sacrificed his life, being buried alive so that the fortress could be built. Legend has it the noble is still buried somewhere beneath the Mehrangarh fort. Do you believe in curses? Let me know in the comments. Number 7. Etowah Indian mounds. From between 1000 and 1550 AD, the Mississippian culture ruled a huge part of the southeastern United States. They were responsible for the construction of the biggest cities north of Mexico prior to European intervention. In Georgia, not far from Cartersville, you can find the remains of one of their most mysterious cities. The site itself is called Etowah Indian Mounds, and it stretches 54 acres. Scientists believe it was occupied for at least 550 years by an advanced group of Mississippians. According to Georgia State Parks, the people who built the nameless city were likely the ancestors of the Muskogee Creek culture. The Muskogee Creek and the Cherokee still consider the Etowah Mounds to be sacred. There are 3 main platform mounds inside the park, and 3 slightly smaller mounds, but there were hundreds of buildings. In 2005, scientists began mapping the ground using magnetometers. They found a total of 140 buildings that once stood on the site, and that's only scratching the surface. Archaeologists also found fragments of pottery from an even older civilization who lived here around 200 BC. This was clearly a very important place. And yet, despite the research, experts still can't say why. Scientists can't even say what the mounds were used for, other than they had some ceremonial value. Shamans may have conducted ceremonies atop the mounds, or they may have just been elevated platforms for houses. The other mystery researchers can't solve is where the people here went. Nobody knows why they suddenly abandoned their great city, although it may have had something to do with warfare. Archaeologists did find a semicircular fortification system surrounding the mounds. This means they definitely had a way to defend themselves. They also found the remains of an orchard surrounding the fortification, which would have prevented archers from shooting flaming arrows over the top. Number 6. Queen of Sheba's embankment. The Ijebu kingdom emerged fairly recently in western Nigeria about 500 years ago. They suddenly appeared in southern Yorubaland and constructed their capital of Ijebu Ode around the 15th century. The members of the kingdom were ethnic Yoruba, a group of people who still live throughout Nigeria, Togo, and Benin. Surrounding the borders of the Ijebu kingdom is a series of forgotten ditches and embankments. These ditches and embankments can be found in the forests, mostly overgrown and disused for centuries. The most impressive is called the Queen of Sheba's embankment. It's longer than Hadrian's Wall in England, over 100 miles, and circles an area bigger than Greater London. It's one of the most impressive ancient constructions that most people haven't even heard of. In fact, this embankment is believed to be the largest man-made monument in Africa, although this hasn't been officially proven. The embankments and ditches surrounding the Lost Kingdom's borders are a mystery. They were likely used as some kind of great defensive mechanism, but nobody really knows. The Queen of Sheba's embankment has never even been officially dated, although it definitely was made before the Ijebu kingdom. Archaeologists have suggested it was built around 870 AD, though this has been confusing because human activity has been found here dating back to the Stone Age. And then there's the legend of the queen herself. There is a sacred grove sheltered inside the overgrown embankment. It's said that the legendary Queen of Sheba, the very same from the Bible, is buried somewhere within. Number 5. The MetaRomulai. There was once a pyramid in Vatican City. It was called the MetaRomulai, or the Piramide Vaticana, and it dated back somewhere around 1,500 years. In the early days of Rome, we're talking the 1st century BC, there was an obsession with ancient Egyptian culture. Even Caesar Augustus liked the Egyptian customs enough to copy their pyramids in his own constructions. Rome teetered on having their emperors buried in pyramids like the Egyptian pharaohs of old, but settled for building pyramid-shaped monuments instead. One of these monuments was the MetaRomulai. It's a huge stone pyramid built between the Vatican's St. Peter's Basilica and the Mausoleum of Hadrian. It's important to note that the pyramid no longer stands. By the 16th century, it was almost completely demolished, and nobody even knew what it was. There were rumors in the Middle Ages that the pyramid was used as a tomb for the legendary founders of Rome, brothers Romulus and Remus. Its remains weren't found in modern times until construction work in 1948. The concrete foundation was found, but the pyramid was long gone. Even today, experts don't know what the pyramid was used for, or even who commissioned its construction. Number 4. The Isle of Tortuga. One of the greatest pirate strongholds in history was a place called Tortuga. This ancient and mysterious island is in the Caribbean and was used in the 17th century as a pirate town. Just like Port Royal in Jamaica, Tortuga was a base of operations to attack Spanish colonies. French and English colonists arrived on the island in 1625. Prior to them, the island was home to a small group of Spanish colonists who had been there for nearly a century. The French and the English began to establish plantations, then found themselves being bullied by the Spanish. They tried to kick out the colonists in 1629, but found themselves defeated. Starting in 1630, French and English colonies divided Tortuga in half. By the 1640s, they were building stone fortifications to defend against any kind of Spanish incursion. Somewhere along the way, pirates began to use the island as a safe haven. Buccaneers like Henry Morgan and Francois L'Olonnais frequented Tortuga. But as with all other pirate strongholds, modernism and globalization were inevitable. The French and Spanish signed a treaty, and piracy was a thing of the past. The buccaneers were expelled from Tortuga, and Spain handed the island over to France in 1697. These days, the island belongs to the Haitians. But here's something you might not know. Tortuga and the rest of Haiti was inhabited 7,000 years ago. Archaeologists have found evidence of farming villages established by the indigenous Arawak starting around 300 BC in Haiti. Nobody knows exactly where these people came from, only that they lived in the Caribbean for thousands of years before Europeans arrived. When Christopher Columbus found Hispaniola in 1492, it was populated by a group called the Taino, but over the next few decades, the Spanish enslaved and killed them all. By the time the age of piracy started, most of the indigenous people had been killed working in the mines as slaves. Their culture and history is buried alongside long-forgotten stashes of pirate treasure on these Caribbean islands. Number 3. Rujum ElHiri. Rujum ElHiri looks like a primitive maze built in the middle of a farmer's field. It's the largest megalithic monument anywhere in the Near East, located just a few miles from the Sea of Galilee. It's in the historic area of Golan Heights, located almost 3,000 feet above sea level. Although the ancient monument looks like a maze, archaeologists think it was an astronomical observatory. It's the Israeli version of Stonehenge, just without the stones. Instead of being built using megalithic blocks like the ancient Druids in Britain, Rujum ElHiri was made using 40,000 tons of basalt rock. The rock was spread in an arrangement of concentric circles at a height of about 8 feet. Little more than a foot of rock remains today. The one thing scientists can't really figure out is how exactly the monument was used by ancient astronomers. It was built 5,500 years ago, long before people understood anything about the distant cosmos. Experts think these stone circles may have lined up with the sun, allowing the ancients to track each solstice. In the 1990s, archaeologist Jonathan Mizrachi noticed the entranceway pointed directly at the sunrise on the summer solstice. There also appear to be notches in the walls that indicate the equinoxes. There also may have been villages here, suggesting a prehistoric cult of star worshippers. Number 2. Dolbadan Castle. Dolbadan Castle isn't in the best shape. It's a crumbling fortification built early in the 13th century. After all these years, the only thing that still stands is a single circular keep and the stubby remains of some walls. It still technically has a courtyard, but the towers and fortifications that once surrounded it are long gone. Still, the keep, which rises a whopping 46 feet, gives unparalleled views of the Welsh countryside. The tower is in such a picturesque spot that it's been used in famous paintings for centuries, and is one of Wales's top scenic destinations. The history behind the castle is equally fascinating. It was built by Llywelyn the Great, King of Gwynedd. He ruled Wales for 45 long years, using Dolbadan Castle as a strategic military outpost. In 1284, Edward I, King of England, took the castle away and then stole pieces of it to build another castle at Caernarfon, which, by the way, is another extremely impressive castle in Wales. After this, Dolbadarn was a sad shell of its former self. It was used briefly as a manor house, and then nobody really knows what happened to it. Between the 14th and 18th centuries, there are very few records of the castle. But then, in the 1760s, the castle, in ruins at this point, became a favorite topic for painters and enjoyed some serious publicity. Number 1. The Fishbourne Roman Palace. In 1805, construction workers in England accidentally found the remains of one of the most impressive Roman palaces in Britain. A new home was being built, and the construction workers were shocked when they came across the ruined foundations of a very real palace. It's now called the Fishbourne Roman Palace because it was found in the village of Fishbourne. It was built around 75 AD, which was 30 years after the Roman Empire conquered Britain. This villa, or palace, whichever you prefer, was home to one of the first elite Roman British families. Just like modern people, Romans were constantly upgrading their homes. The palace was built in the 1st century and received extensions and alterations for the next 200 years. Mosaics were overlaid with more sophisticated works of art. New owners destroyed old mosaics and replaced them with their favorite pieces. More wings were added, better construction materials were used, then the whole place burnt to a cinder in 270 AD and was abandoned. Archaeologists don't know what happened, only that the villa burned to the ground and nobody ever built on the land again. Thanks for watching. What was your favorite place? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye!